Hello, welcome back. I'm Statman Dave, and today we're going to be reacting to my Premier League predictions. Make sure, of course, to like that goddamn video, subscribe if you're new. Anyway, let's get this party started. Coming 20th in the Premier League next season, of course, is going to be Cardiff City. Moving to the second team that I feel will face the drop again, it's going to be Huddersfield Town. Moving to the final team that's going to face the drop, unfortunately, Brighton fans, it's going to be you. Decent start there, 2 out of 3. We got Cardiff right and we got Huddersfield Town both getting relegated. The two big problems for both Huddersfield and Cardiff was their lack of goals in the Premier League. Huddersfield Town 22 goals scored and Cardiff only 34 in 38 games. Both of those teams had those weaknesses at the start of the season, and that's why I had them both going down, which was confirmed at the end of the season. Brighton did finish 17th and had a pretty poor season. Of course, Chris Hughton is no longer manager. He has been sacked, sort of building on that persuasion that maybe Brighton and Hove Albion could have gone down comfortably. In 2019, they only won 2 games. Their signings didn't line up with the manager. The brought players in that are a little bit too flary for Chris Hughton, who likes that rigid 4-4-2. Moving on to who's going to get sacked first. That's the next topic of conversation. I think there's a few managers out there that could be seeing the chop in the early months of the season. But for me, Mark Hughes is absolutely favourite. So we nearly got that one correct as well. Mark Hughes was the second manager to lose his job in the Premier League this season, behind Jokanovic of Fulham. Jokanovic a bit unfortunate again, signings a bit strange, and they were a little bit outdated in terms of how they moved their philosophy from the Championship to the Premier League. And I think he should have been given a little bit more time, but it was Mark Hughes that was the second guy to be sacked. Outdated, rotten football, 1 win in 14. He deserved the boot maybe a little bit earlier than he actually got it, but that's a pretty decent one for the sack race. Let's move on to that next block of the Premier League. Moving to the last sort of team in this boring block, of course, is Crystal Palace. Roy Hodgson has got Palace playing a good style of football in the Premier League, defensive, good on the counter-attack, with Wilfried Zaha leading them forward. Yeah, I think that wasn't different to what there was in the Premier League this season. They defended well, they broke well through Zaha, but the main man, of course, was Aaron Wan-Bissaka. His Premier League by numbers was absolutely fantastic. He won the most tackles of any defender, he completed the most dribbles and made the most interceptions. A cracking season, and expect him to move to one of the big boys in the Premier League, you think in Manchester United or Manchester City. But it was a standard Roy Hodgson 11th place finish for Crystal Palace. But let's move down to Southampton. We've got to start at the bottom of this boring block. Of course, Mark Hughes was sacked as manager. Ralph Hasenhüttl came in, and what a job he did. He took 30 points from the games he was in charge. That was the same amount as Leicester City and Watford managed in that same period. But also, the style came back, the pressing, the aggression. You're looking at someone like Nathan Redmond, his 6 goals and 4 assists under Hasenhüttl. Absolutely fantastic stats there, and expect them to move forward. But a big mistake now, 16th position. I did have Watford. Here's what I had to say about those guys at the start of the season. Watford are another team that are going to be stuck in that same area. Losing someone like Richarlison, yeah, they've got a lot of money, but he was a key part of their side. I don't think we can look past that. Richarlison was a massive loss to Watford, but the job that Javi Gracia has done there has been absolutely incredible. Bringing back the Spanish 4-4-2, narrowing midfield, 4 central midfielders in there, with the likes of Will Hughes really starring, but Decore in the middle, massive, linking with the likes of Troy Deeney, and of course the main man, Delafeo's coming a bit of alive in the Premier League. Watford massively outperformed where expected them to finish in the Premier League. Now, on to Burnley, that we got completely correct. But why were Burnley going to struggle after their cracking finish last season? So let's move on to Sean Dyche's Burnley. Yes, they are massively down the table this season, but I think that's all down to the Europa League. I don't think their squad is big enough to deal with multiple competitions. And I think their squad wasn't big enough to deal with multiple competitions. Something that you have to have in the Europa League is arguably having a squad of 25 players that you can play. One team on Thursday, one team at the weekend. The standout player, though, for Burnley this season was, of course, Dwight McNeil, a former Manchester United graduate who did really well for Burnley in terms of creating chances for his teammates. He created more chances through crosses per 90 than any other player under the age of 21 in Europe's top 5 leagues. And he's Viz's mate. What more could you want? A Burnley young player coming through, really becoming a star of the Premier League. Next up, Fulham, the surprise relegation fodder. I expected them with their signings, the likes of Seri, Schurrle, coming in, linking with Mitrovic, could have done quite well, but Jokanovic was booted out, Ranieri was brought in, and then poor old Scott Parker had to finish off the job there. One player I did mention in the prediction was Mitrovic, who scored 11 goals for Fulham, but unfortunately couldn't lead them to survival. Fulham back down to the Championship. Under Scott Parker, though, we could see them bounce back if they can keep the likes of Tom Kearney and Ryan Sessegnon. And next in this this little block, of course, Bournemouth and Newcastle. Rafa Benitez, what a job he did for them. Of course, getting the likes of Rondon and Perez scoring vital goals. They switched to a back five, they defended really well, and they finished 13th. Credit to the Spanish tactician. But also Bournemouth, they hit a bit of a sticky patch of form in the middle of the season, but the likes of Joshua King and, of course, the main man Ryan Fraser creating from that left-hand side. Ryan Fraser registered 14 assists in the Premier League this season. Only Eden Hazard managed more. For me, the standout player for the teams underneath the top 6 sides. Really good on the ball, but works hard in the defensive sense. And credit to Bournemouth once again, punching above their weight. But I kind of expected them to jump into that next bracket, that Europa League bracket. So Eddie Howe's got to do some work on his defence in the next season. Again, in 2019, the 3rd worst defence in the league, something that Eddie Howe needs to work on. The defensive strength, but also their consistency needs to improve. You take that 4-0 win against Chelsea. We didn't see more of those performances, so Eddie Howe's got to work on that in the off-season. Moving on to the overachievers of the Premier League this season, it will be Wolverhampton Wanderers. Those guys are going to get the Europa League position. 7th place for Nuno Espirito Santo's Wolverhampton Wanderers. I couldn't be more happy than seeing that Wolves' 7th position in the Premier League. What a prediction that was. But you're looking at who they had last season. Raul Jimenez was a player I mentioned in the predictions that I expect to have a very good season, but the likes of Diogo Jota, Ruben Neves in central midfield. Nuno evolved as well. He moved from that 2-man midfield to a 3-man midfield. The likes of João Moutinho with Dendoncourt and Ruben Neves in that position. Fantastic stuff from Wolves. Adaptable, good, exciting team, and the wing-backs providing that great width in the final third. So happy to see Wolves 7th in the Premier League and expect them to push that top 6 next year with Leicester City and Brendan Rodgers. But going back to 10th position, we predicted Everton. They in fact outperformed themselves. I think the likes of Andre Gomez with Gylfi Sigurdsson back in that creative form really showed what someone like a Marco Silva can do with a side. They started off poorly, but as Marco Silva got his style of football across, they turned into a really good unit. Only Manchester City won the ball back more in the final third than Everton this season, and Richarlison, the work rate that he put in, 33 times he won the ball back in that dangerous area. Expect Everton to continually improve with the teams around them. Next up, we had West Ham, and a player that we highlighted was Felipe Anderson. In terms of Felipe Anderson, he's going to be the guy that I expect to really evolve at West Ham United. Felipe Anderson scored 9 goals and got 4 assists for West Ham in the Premier League this season, but more impressively, the work rate that we saw at Lazio. 4.4 tackles in the Premier League this season for Felipe Anderson, winning 2.5. No West Ham player managed more tackles per game. An impressive blending that attacking creativity with defensive work rate. A top signing and one of the best in this season. Next up, we've got to go for Leicester City, who made a cracking managerial appointment halfway through the year with Brendan Rodgers moving from Celtic to Leicester. The midfield three they've got going in the back end of the season was delightful to watch. Yuri Tillsman and of course Maddison with Ndidi in behind. A blend of passing with creativity, but also Ndidi at the base. But let's have a little look at what I said about James Maddison coming into the year. And I feel for this Leicester City side that's lost Mahrez's creativity on the wing, moving to a number 10 in James Maddison, they're going to have a really good guy in there that can pick a little pocket of space behind Jamie Vardy. Again, a 20-goal-a-season striker in the Premier League. That's what Vardy's been doing. And I think that's the thing there, James Maddison, the only player in the Premier League to create 100 chances in this season's competition. What a talent he was in the Championship, what a talent he is now in the Premier League. I think Brendan Rodgers is going to get the best out of him, either playing him as a free eight or on that left wing, cutting inside to create for Jamie Vardy, who again, 18 goals in the Premier League, a good season from Vardy, who has become a consistent goal scorer in the Premier League. Maybe someone like Arsenal should have picked him up a few seasons ago. So let's move on now to look at what I thought was going to happen in the top 6 of the Premier League. Top 6 clip. This is so difficult. This is the first time we've seen 6 top-class managers in the Premier League. That's Pochettino, Sarri, of course Mourinho, Klopp, Guardiola, and of course Unai Emery. A crazy end to the season where Spurs, Chelsea, Manchester United and Arsenal just didn't want Champions League football. Since the 20th of April, they won 4 out of their 18 games between them. Absolutely rubbish finish, but let's see how I predicted that sort of top 6 at the start of the year. In terms of 6th position, I think it's going to be Chelsea, Arsenal and Spurs. They're going to be 4th and 5th in the Premier League next season. I've gone with Spurs in 5th position though because they haven't bought any players. Unai Emery's Arsenal. I think he's really going to surprise a lot of people with his style and he's going to unlock Mesut Ozil. Well, that's the first one we've got to highlight. Mesut Ozil was not unlocked by Unai Emery. The two clashed, and it looks like Mesut Ozil may be leaving the Emirates in the summer. But Arsenal looked so good in parts of the season, that massive 26 unbeaten run that kicked off Arsenal's sort of push to get the top 4, but they slipped off, and it looks like the Europa League is going to be the way that they're going to get into the Champions League. I expect Emery to lift his 4th Europa League. I think he's got a little bit too much for Maurizio Sarri in that final. Chelsea finishing in 3rd position. What a season the Italian tactician had. Started off so well and got the points together. Of course, Eden Hazard was their key guy. 16 goals, 15 assists in the Premier League, but it could be his last year at Chelsea. Expect him to maybe move to either Real Madrid or Bayern Munich in the summer. Again, if Chelsea don't want to lose him on a free, they want to make some money, they've got to sell him this summer. But a good season from Eden Hazard. We're starting to see what Sarri can do with his team, being slightly more pragmatic, but he may also leave the club as well, which could leave Chelsea in a really bad position considering their transfer ban. And Spurs this season was a really interesting one. They didn't spend any money, made 0 signings, but it puts Pochettino into an even higher bracket. What an unbelievable coach has got Spurs to their first ever Champions League final, but also into the top 4. What a man, what a hero. Moussa Sissoko looks like the best player in the world under, of course, Pochettino. But also had to deal with so many injuries this year. Harry Kane was out, Ali was out, Eriksen was out, Son was out. Unbelievable stuff from Pochettino, and credit to them, 4th position in the Premier League once again. What a season at the new White Hart Lane. So now on to 3rd position. Let's see what stupid things I had to say. I've gone with Manchester United, and I feel that's because teams above them have maybe strengthened a little bit better. Excellent stuff there, Dave. Manchester United, they're not going to quite win the league. They're just going to be below because they didn't make the signings. How wrong I was. Mourinho disappeared. Solskjaer has now come in. And Man United have got a lot of work to do in the summer. But what we did get right was Pogba's improvement, directly involved in 22 goals in the Premier League this year, from 16 last season. But anyway, let's move on quickly. But in terms of the Golden Boot, I'm going to go for Mo Salah, number 1, Kane, number 2, and Aubameyang, number 3. Not too bad there. We had Mohamed Salah, number 1, Kane, number 2, and Aubameyang, number 3. In fact, it was Aubameyang, of course, Mane, and Salah. Pretty decent stuff there, and you'd probably expect Harry Kane to be in with a shout with the Golden Boot if he wasn't so injured. Scored 17 goals in 28 appearances in the Premier League this year. But the interesting one, of course, is the main man, Sadio Mane. What a season he had. The most goals from open play in the Premier League. Not only that, but he scored the joint most with his head. So a part of his game that he massively improved this season. With Liverpool throwing their wing-backs forward, crossing the ball, Mane was constantly in that area. And that's where the real title challenge came from. Those two players both scoring a lot of goals, with credit to Aubameyang as well. In fact, Aubameyang not only scored the joint most goals in the Premier League, but he missed the most big chances. Imagine if he was a little bit more clinical, would have ran away with the Golden Boot. So now on to who I predicted is going to win the title, the real fun stuff of this Premier League. On to 2nd place in the Premier League, it's going to be Liverpool. They've solved their problems. They've signed their new goalkeeper, Alisson, one of the best goalkeepers in world football right now. But also bringing the likes of Naby Keita, replacing Philippe Coutinho, who left last summer, and Fabinho. Fabinho is going to be the linchpin in midfield, anchoring it in front of the back 4. We weren't wrong there. Alisson, the most clean sheets in the Premier League this year, takes home the Golden Gloves. Some unbelievable 1v1 saves that he's made. He's kept Liverpool in the games in the real fine moments, and a cracking signing by Jurgen Klopp. But as well, Naby Keita's shown some real good form in the last few months, but the main man was Fabinho, freeing up the wing-backs. This is what Jurgen Klopp's vision of Liverpool was, freeing up the wing-backs, allowing them to get into the final third and attack. Alexander-Arnold registered an assist in each of his last 6 games, registering 9 assists in his last 9. Not only that, but Robertson contributed with assists galore as well, 11 in the Premier League, equating to 25% of Jurgen Klopp's team's goals scored in the Premier League assisted by their 2 fullbacks. That's been the improvement. Fabinho's been able to allow them to do that, but also that front 3 as we mentioned before. Firmino's had the same season he had last year. Salah's had a little bit of a worse year, but still scored the goals, and Mane has been the main man. From open play, been absolutely fantastic, as we mentioned before, and we're just short of their first Premier League title in 29 years. Now, to who I thought was going to win the Premier League, it's a simple one. Of course, Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. Now it's time to talk about the champions, Manchester City. Pep Guardiola, all that possession. I think we'll move on to win the Premier League once again. Going to be another very good goal-scoring season for Manchester City. I don't expect them to break records, but I expect them to win the Premier League. It's an interesting one there. Records was something that I mentioned in that predictions, which, again, came out on top. City scored 95 goals in the Premier League this season. That's 11 fewer than they managed last campaign. They also had 2 fewer points and lost 2 more games. Pep Guardiola's team wasn't that far ahead of the likes of Liverpool this season. Credit to Jurgen Klopp, but also credit to Pep Guardiola. The style for me wasn't as good this year. Thought they were a little bit slower in midfield. Thought they missed Kevin De Bruyne through his injuries. He was a real sort of playmaker for them in the final third when they went on that record-breaking season. Without him, they've struggled a little bit, and expect City to make some signings both in central midfield and at fullback as well. Benjamin Mendy, arguably the flop of the season. Started so well, but then we haven't seen him. Injuries, his attitude's been wrong, and expect them to maybe go for a left back in the summer. But credit to Pep Guardiola winning another league title. He's done it with Bayern, he's done it with Barcelona, and now he's done it back-to-back with Manchester City. And if he goes on to win it next year, he'll join Fergie being the only manager to win it 3 times in a row. Something that Chelsea have never done. But anyway, guys, that's me reacting to my Premier League predictions. We got a lot right, we also got a lot wrong. But shout out to Burnley in 15th place, pinpoint predicting, but also Wolverhampton Wanderers. Get into the comments below. What did you predict right? What did you predict wrong? Of course, like the video, subscribe if you're new. I've been Statman Dave. See you later. If you've enjoyed this content, why not check out other Tactics Explained videos? Or alternatively, if you like your tactics, what is a great playlist about all types of tactical roles around the world of football.